I had the hots for Gabriel because he had blonde hair and blue eyes. I'm not going to admit to my grandmother that I had an 8-year-old boyfriend.
Stories with Vavo. Stories with Vavo. Listen to them all. We got those stories with Vavo. She was born in Rotterbush, and her stories are the best of all. And she'll never stop talking. Stories with Vavo. Stories with Vavo. Listen to them all. We got those stories with Vavo. Stories with Vavo.
Well, welcome back. We are entering into episode 2 of Stories with Vavo. We left you with a little teaser about Gabriel, but first we want to go back because I think we want to add a few details about when Vavo was sick and
Yes.
how that all went down.
Yeah.
So
Well, I just after thinking about it, I was thinking, one thing I remembered, we looked it up, it's watercress that we put in the wine concoction that I was drinking that we all believe healed me, this concoction of wine and honey and watercress. And anyway, it was something last week, I forgot the name of it. And the other thing was that during the time of my illness, they built a hut out in the yard, and it was all done with thick straw. There wasn't a window in it or anything. It was open a little bit, like a short door to get me in and out of it. And they would sit me in there for 2-3 hours in the hot afternoon, and that was like a sauna. I
Just figured that they were going to sweat it out of you, or what?
I don't know what their intention was, but I know everybody was saying, yeah, you have to put her in and do the sauna thing. But it was really shortly at that time that I got the wine to drink. So I can't say the saunas helped or it was the wine that helped. You know, wine is good for everything. So, but anyway, that was part of the treatments they gave me. And I also didn't mention the fact that I needed blood transfusions. So there's no such thing as the, sophisticated equipment that they have today. My mother was giving me blood simply because she was the closest relative. And my aunt, who lived there as well, was the next, they figured, healthy, close relative. So one day, they came every day and took a syringe full of blood out of my mother's arm and directly put it into my vein.
There's no typing or anything.
Nothing.
Blood type.
We didn't know for a long time. I created antibodies in my blood, which we found out when I first got pregnant. And because the baby died, and they were blaming the rhesus factor that...
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. So no typing, and I did find out my mother's blood type was the same as mine, so that wouldn't have been a problem. But my Aunt Adelaide, who afterwards immigrated, tried to get what her blood type was, and still don't know what her blood type was. So I have a feeling that's probably where she probably didn't have the same type blood. And
it's like going into that type of area that we take a lot of this for granted with today's science.
That's right.
And you're in an area that doesn't have access to all of this science.
Nothing.
It's all based
Yeah.
on people.
So they just knew you needed blood out of one vein into the next vein.
Wow.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's pretty wild to think like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like I mentioned that. You know, I mentioned this story to Jesse,
Mm-hmm.
and again, like with the idea of, you know, essentially a witch doctor. You said they call him the witch doctor.
They did,
too, right?
yeah.
So this lady tells you to do this.
Yeah.
And she's surprised that, a very hardcore Christian.
Yeah,
woman
that's
like
right.
Vavo, you know.
Yeah.
Would
Well,
listen.
at that time, I already objected to the witch doctors. And I don't know what ingrained that in me. I must have heard stories or something. But I heard, I can't remember verbatim now what stories anymore, but there's some gruesome sounding stories about what they did to try to cure different people by going to these, I called them medicine people, but yeah, they called them Fitsadas, which is a witch. So,
Wow.
because they figured, you know, they got all this knowledge about stuff that, where would they get it from?
But at the end of the day, witch doctor, naturopath, whatever it was,
Yeah.
she figured that this watercress was going to
Was gonna give me good vitamins.
Ferment it with whatever else.
Yeah, yeah,
And that took care of things.
yeah.
So, you know, at the end of the day, it was some natural remedy that took care
That,
of
yeah, yeah. And pleurisy is weird, you know. It's not as it's not contagious like to TB, but it's in that same family of diseases. So.
Right. Okay, so
I should mention is that the people around, like my mother's neighbors and all the, you know, the friends, everybody who knew us around the town, they were, everybody came to see what, from the little they had, what could they bring, you know, and they were offering to make food and different things. And of course, the big problem was that I didn't have any appetite. And so my sister would sit there and eat all my food, and she was getting chubby as could be. But I didn't have the appetite. It wasn't, you know, that Mama lacked the food.
yeah.
But
So
everybody's
throwing in input
pitching
too.
in,
You
yeah.
gotta put her in this
Oh, yeah.
hot hut.
Yeah,
gotta do
yeah.
This, you gotta do that.
Yeah.
So, but you didn't feel like going back to the hut. Did it actually do anything for you? You don't feel like anything happened until.
I just remember being in that hot, steamy hut, and it was nice. Like, it wasn't a bad memory. It wasn't like I was over hot and wanted to get out of there or anything like that. But the weather there doesn't get that cold or that hot, you know, in the Azores. But
Okay.
it
so
helped.
Yeah. So nothing really changed until you went to see the witch doctor.
Right.
The witch doctor.
Sent the recipe.
All right. So
Yeah.
so then we talked a little bit about you. You know, you got better.
Mm-hmm.
You went back to school.
Yeah, I went back to school. And one thing I didn't mention was that we had segregated schools. It was girls' school and boys' school. We were in the same building together, boys and girls. They were, you know.
They just tried harder with the girls. That's why all the girls could read and write. The boys couldn't.
I think so. The boys didn't like getting whacked over the head with the pointer, so they quit, went to work on the farm. So after I got better, I was remembering about the feast days. I didn't mention before. All through the year, there were special feast days, and they were religious in nature. And then you would process down the streets, would get all decorated with flower petals, and everybody competed for the piece in front of their door to look prettier than the piece in front of the next door. And then they would process all down this one long street which led to the church. And the one that I remember most is the Feast of the Holy Spirit. So when the Holy Spirit came down on the apostles, they took that feast to demonstrate the goodness of the Holy Spirit and the I can't find a word not to say how generous the Holy Spirit. So they would contact all the people who lived away, like my father and his brothers, and many of them who had immigrated, would send money to the person in charge of that feast day so that they could get a piece of meat given from the cart which drove behind this procession with chunks of meat, and depending on how much money they got, it was all above board, it was all written down who sent what, and the family would get their portion of meat. And it was great happiness and clapping and going on when these meats were delivered. And there again, we had the open oxen cart, big cart driven by oxen, and the big baskets with these chunks of meat in the back of the cart. And that, I'm pretty sure that feast is in June. So it would be...
I don't imagine it was packed in ice.
No, we didn't know anything about ice. And then, yeah, of course, the flies were flying everywhere, and the meat got delivered to the homes and made a lot of people happy. So
did that turn into a big party where you're actually preparing the meat in a certain
No,
way?
that was left up to the individual who got it. But at the end of that procession, they all went down into the open area by the church, which you could probably call it the marketplace, like in the time of the Bible when people went to hire their workers at the marketplace. That was the area where they did it there. And then they would set up stalls to party. And the band was there. They had a big oompa band, and that was always so funny in my mind. I remember they had always a competition between the old band, which was the senior people, and the new band, which was young upstarts who wanted to start their own band, and always they had their own numbers to play and everything. And then people could buy like the pickled lupini beans, we call them tremousse, and boiled corn, the white corn, maize, and the pardon?
The favas.
Oh, fava beans, yeah, which would have been soaked and fried, and then you just get scoops of these fava beans. And talk about containers to take stuff away. Nobody had containers. You got your handful of beans and put them in your pocket. And the ones who were wet now, I can't remember how we transported the tremousse. Probably still in your pocket. There were no... Maybe they took bowls. Yeah, maybe they did. Which reminds me of another story about the bowls, how precious they were. But I'll finish with the feast. They also would have candy. And this would be little bits of, somebody would make some kind of candy. And my brother Tony got home one day after this feasting going on, and my grandmother noticed he's got a funny lump under his shirt. What's he doing? And she says, "Did you steal something at the marketplace?" No, I didn't steal anything. And he was trying not to show her. And she finally opened up his shirt, and he had a bag of candy. And she said, "You had to steal this. You didn't have any money." "No, it's Sophie's boyfriend, Gabriel. He gave me that to bring to her." And I'm 8 years old at the time. I had the hots for Gabriel because he had blonde hair and blue eyes, which is so not in keeping with our island. Anyway, I'm not going to admit to my grandmother that I had an 8-year-old boyfriend. Anyhow, no, she says, Fee, it's your present from your boyfriend. No, I don't have a boyfriend. So my grandmother, being the wise old woman that she is, she says, okay, well, if you don't want it, that's okay. I'll take it. And she put it on and took it inside to the kitchen. And she says, now anybody who wants a piece of candy, I've got some here. So,
You missed out on it, or you just
no, I went. Of course, I had a piece. I wouldn't miss out entirely, but I wasn't going to admit anybody was sending me a bag of candy. So, so that was good. I would see him from time to time. Like I said, we were not in school together, so it just depended what was going on, a feast day or something, I might see him. I remember he had a nice smile.
How many people are actually in the village then? Like, how
Oh,
many people are we talking?
population?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Like, if you got some
Maybe
kids
500 or 600.
Oh, okay.
I doubt if it was much more than that. Now it is bigger.
Okay.
But,
yeah, no, I
yeah.
just was curious, like how big a town we're talking.
Yeah, not very big at
Everybody
all.
knows everybody. And,
Yeah, yeah. So, and then the other thing I wanted to say was lots of times, like the men would come with their donkeys, and like they'd have a saddlebag over the donkey with what they were selling, mainly fish. And so you would go and get your fish. If you didn't have money, sometimes he would let you take corn or pay with corn or eggs or something that you had home. Barter for the fish. And also, in the summertime, there was a man who came, and I don't know how he did it, but he had cold like a sherbet in these saddlebags, and they were made totally out of fresh fruits, all the fruits that were in season at the time. And he had a little paddle, a little wooden paddle, and the container he'd put it in was like a little boat, sort of like a little bottom of a boat. And he'd take the sherbet from his bag. So it may have been packed in salt. Would salt keep it hard? I have no idea. But this thing was kept fresh and cold. And of course, the kids would love that. We never had the money to buy it. But then one day, my brother Tony took corn from Mama's stash in the backyard and went and bartered for a thing of ice cream. And the first thing he did was tell Esther, if you tell Mama, I'm going to kill you. She says, well, you got to give me a lick of it. And so did I. So the three of us licked off this little tiny boat of sherbet, stolen corn from Mama's stash.
And you often wonder if she actually knew. And just
Oh, sure, she would have known, yeah. She would have known. It was her way of just letting him get away with it and giving us a treat. But she didn't have the coin for us to do. Another thing in that house, we didn't have running water. So we had a big clay jar. You've seen the oil jars from Alibaba and all that. It was big like that. And we had to go to the corner of the street. We walked quite a bit to go with buckets. And there was running water from a faucet. And we would fill our buckets and come back home and fill them into the jar in the kitchen. And that's where all our water came from. So every day there were trips to the corner faucet to get buckets of water to put into our jar. Cooking, everything was done with that water.
So obviously at this time there's electricity places on the island.
There are, but when we went to that house, there was a home in quite a distance away, but it had hooked up to electricity. And my uncle decided he's just going to join up to it. So there was no permits, nobody asked questions. So we had one little electric light coming into the house, and we got caught, so that got cut off. And then after that, we were back to our lamp and doing things by hand. I don't know what the electric light would have helped except for Mama to see better, to do her embroidery and stuff. Yeah, that's another story I remember now, was when my mother and her sisters sat around on the floor in their house, and they had a light. But that light came, there was one single light that hung from the ceiling, a bulb, and it was over, hung over their heads so they could see to work when it got dark. And one time, my brother Tony tied a mouse to that light wire coming down. He was a mischievous little bugger. And he tied a mouse to it, so the light started jiggling when the mouse was hanging there. And the women all wondered, what's going on with this light? And they look up and see the mouse. What scatter action there was that time. And Mama knew right away, Tony! Little tiny mouse he hung there.
So he would have got a licking for that.
Oh, absolutely. He got licking every day for something.
Was there a big disparity in like his leash compared to your leash, like as far as what you could do? Like,
oh yeah,
he jumping ahead to when you're older, but
yeah.
At that age,
But at that age, he was allowed to go out with his friends, run around the neighborhood and all that, where Esther and I, we had to have, Mama knew exactly where we were. We would go to a neighbor's house, but she knew exactly where we were playing and all that. Right. Yeah. And another thing I thought about was they didn't have much for kids in the way of celebrating like you do with school picnics and stuff like that here. But we did have, every year there was a day of friends. That's the friends, amigos and amigas. Amigos was men, masculine friends, and amigas was the women friends. And they got the children, it's not all that many, they got trucked from our main area down to the big beach to have a picnic. And what friends got together, and they had these great big iron cauldron things that they put on a fire in the beach to make a big pot of soup. But we all had to take a bowl to the beach to get our soup in. So Esther and I had a bowl, and Tony had a bowl, but he went off with the boys, and Esther and I went with the women, and we ate our soup. Everything was fine. We were going home, and as we came off the truck, she thought I had the bowl, and I thought she had it, and we dropped the bowl, and it smashed to smithereens. We bawled our heads off going home because we were so scared of what a beating we were going to get because we broke the bowl. I mean, that was something precious. But when we got home, Mama was in a good mood. She didn't beat us, but she she told us, I told you to be careful. Yeah, we knew that one.
She saw that you're already more upset than she was ever going to.
Yeah. And well, actually, one of the neighbors walked with us and stood beside us and just nailed her with a look to say, these poor little things are so upset because they broke the bowl. Yeah. Oh, these things happen. I wonder what would have happened if the neighbor wasn't there.
Oh my goodness. It's so funny to do when we're talking about this, because like in my mind I know all of those emotions as a kid, and to put you in that position, it's different for me, and obviously much more different for the grandchildren. But it's so nice to hear all the same things that happened to you.
Yeah.
That we all felt the same emotions and fear and whatever, just because you knew this thing was precious to you.
Right.
And that it was your fault and you had to figure it out and deal with the consequences. So it's pretty interesting hearing that, and I'm just like putting myself into your emotional state at that time. So
it was interesting, and sometimes when I see now the children that they have so much, I spoke about, we had to find a bowl to go to the beach and get it filled with soup. That was the meal. And now they've got restrictions on who brings what. You can't take peanut butter. You've got to do these vegetables have to be done just so. And, these types of containers are allowed and these aren't. And we had one bowl. And it's just, they go on an outing and it costs a bundle. You have to pay for the bus. You have to pay for all this stuff. This was a military truck that picked the kids up. That was I suppose, government sponsored or something for the Day of Friends. So.
Yeah, we don't know what it's like, and I'm sure there's a lot of parts of the world that do still know what that's like.
Oh yeah.
But certainly for us, we don't know how good we have it right
Yeah.
now.
And I remember my Uncle Manuel, he was such a kind-hearted man. Did I tell you about him visiting the Azores?
That's not the guy that beat the guy up.
No, it's another Manuel from my mother's sister.
Good shot that your boyfriend's name was going to be.
Yeah. No, his name was Manuel Piquet. And he married my Aunt Mary. And he went for a trip to the Azores. This was before we left there. And he went to stay with my grandmother. And he had a suitcase full of his clothes. And as he walked the streets and saw the poverty and the beggars sitting around, he was so heartbroken. He left every stitch of clothing to give to passed out to all these people.
Yeah, how
and
could you not at that point?
Yeah, and he went home in the clothes he needed to wear and left everything to those poor people. He said to my grandmother, he just lost track completely because he'd been living in the States since his youth. That, how poor and how much people needed stuff there.
Yeah, and I bet even going back in 2018, you probably felt like you went into a little bit of a time warp too.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I don't imagine all the comforts and everything
No.
have made their way there.
No, but I remember us going into the house which we lived in, and my old Olivia friend had bought it, and she had 9 children living in that house. Wow. And there was one bedroom on the bottom, and all the rest of the kids would have been on the floor like we were when we were little. The attic upstairs, it was called the upstairs, but it was like a big attic above the house. and all just straw mattresses on the floor for kids to sleep on, and her kids would have all been there. On
9 kids on the attic
Yeah.
floor. So if you can put this in perspective, because like, I'm not imagining a very big house.
No, it isn't.
Center
And it
home.
wasn't.
You've
Yeah.
got, I don't know.
The little rooms were just big enough to house a bed and a couple of chairs on either side. And then, and so that's the area that was covered by the attic upstairs. It wouldn't carry on over the kitchen because that was a big open chimney, because always the cooking was done on an open fire. There was no stove either there.
You know, you take that into consideration. You think like the opportunity that has happened for you and your family
Yeah,
by being able to leave the island. And
That's right.
probably why Vavo wanted out.
yeah, yeah.
And then you come back 50, 60 years,
Years later.
and this woman is still living in that house.
Yeah,
And
but
it's never
she did put in a stove, like where the old fireplace was, and she did have a refrigerator, and she had running water, and she had beautiful tile on her floor and the walls. So that was all like, what do you call it, work to make things pretty, you know, and of course the convenience of running water and all that. But her space upstairs, she had nobody left. She was alone, and she was a widow when we went. But that space upstairs would not have changed because probably, you know, as the kids
Think of, like,
marry.
raising 9 kids
Yeah.
in a place like that.
Yeah.
So then,
And I remember when we were living in Ohio many years later, I used to always keep in touch with her, and I would send her a little bit of money at Christmas time. And then when we were in Ohio, somebody was collecting for something, and I thought, hey, I could collect clothes and send to Olivia, which I did. And she just was so appreciative. I'd send these bags of clothing for her kids, and then it turned out to me that it cost me more to send the bag than the clothes were worth, you know.
you could have sent her the money to buy it.
So, but if I sent money, she would never buy clothes. That was the idea, you know. But she, and that upstairs, the thing that sticks in my mind, has stuck in me before, is the straw mattress. Like, they were fine after you broke them in, but the new ones, like when it was harvest time and there was new fresh straw, the mattresses all got changed because the old ones were full of bed bugs. And we had to dump all the old straw, and they washed those covers and everything and filled them with new straw, which was good to do, but did they ever stick your bones because the straw was sharp.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything to beat them down or anything. So you kind of worked yourself into a little hole in the middle of the mattress, and finally it got a little better. But I hated the time when that harvest came, except I loved the bonfires. We didn't have bonfires with the old mattresses, though. But they used to do bonfires at the time when they were getting rid of the growth in the fields and all that. And our big thing to do in the bonfire was onions. Everybody had onions. You just threw onions into the fire, and they burned to charcoal on the outside, and the inside was sweet as honey.
Oh, really?
That was our big treat.
Have you ever tried doing that here?
I tried doing it in the oven. Oh, no, I didn't do it at... Yes, I did.
Yeah.
We did it at Tootie's Cottage once when they had the bonfire going. I think we were making maple syrup. They had a fire going there, and we stuck the onions in the fire. That worked.
out?
Yeah, sure.
We'll have to try
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I didn't tell you about was rice pudding is a big treat. That probably only happened once a year or whatever. Rice pudding was the treat of the day for weddings. So when someone got married, and then they would have these dishes of rice pudding to give out to their friends. And so that's rarely done, right? And then the Easter bread
Yeah, I was going to say, what about the things like,
Yeah.
you said it was rare not to have cornmeal, to have actual wheat flour.
Yeah.
Like, how did things like melasadas come
Well,
about?
the melasadas they saved the wheat flour to make melasadas. That would be in February, March, the beginning of Lent. So they would still have wheat flour from the crops, the wheat crops at the end of summer. And then the other thing was the Easter bread was all done with wheat flour. And the big treat with Easter bread was you only got butter in that year, probably just to make Easter bread. We never had butter. But when we would go to the store, they put the butter, a big lump of it, on parchment paper and wrapped it up. That's what you took home to make the Easter bread. And Mama used to let us lick the parchment paper when she scraped it.
Lick butter right off the paper?
No, we took our finger on it, slipped our finger on it.
Well, obviously you didn't have much bread or anything to...
No, this was just the flavor of the butter in your mouth was so special. That butter, you never tasted butter like that. That was handmade butter.
Wow. So all of like our favorites, like meringues and stuff.
Yeah,
like
well,
that
that comes after when you make rice pudding, you have all the whites left. You only put yolks in the rice pudding, so the whites get left to make meringues. And those women did not have beaters. They stood there and whipped and whipped and whipped these whites by hand.
Like with a whisk, like that type of...
Yeah, and I don't even remember a whisk in my childhood in the Azores. I remember getting one in Bermuda when we went to Bermuda, but I remember my aunts taking turns passing the bowl. One would whip, 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 whip the next one, but these were all wooden spoons. Wow. And then add the sugar a little bit at a time until it got stiff.
Portuguese woman. Those arms would be strong.
Yeah. So as far as treats go, that was it. Melasadas and the at Lent and the Easter bread, and then rice pudding for a wedding and I don't know what other occasion. There was no such thing as cakes or icings and all that.
Yeah,
chestnuts. That's what. Okay. At Christmas time, it was the time to be buying the fresh chestnuts.
And you can get that there, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was what I was going to ask, like Christmas.
Yeah, the Christmas tree. That's one thing. I didn't write it down, but I meant to remember that Christmas tree. You went out somewhere where somebody had a branch. You could ask to get a branch taken off a tree that would be a good shape. And you just cut it off somebody's tree, and if you didn't care, you sneaked the branch off somebody's tree when nobody was there looking. But this was the tree itself was just to mimic a tangerine tree. Sometimes there was a tangerine branch, but if you couldn't get one, the tree had to be that type of leaf. And you didn't put any decorations on the tree, just hung tangerines on it. Oh. As many as you could muster, you hung the tangerines on the tree. And underneath the tree, you would give up, like that main living room going into the house was at least half of it taken up with the nativity scene. And they made all their little figures out of clay, made them their own by hand, and painted them and did all that.
Is this a family event?
Oh yeah, so everybody worked toward building, and you'd go out on the rocks and pick moss off the rocks that looked like grass, the green moss. And then you'd make little fields between all these little houses you would make out of cardboard, and the clotheslines would be hanging there with little tiny clothes hanging on them. Just make a village like there was a little town there. And then whoever could afford it had something glittery there, but we never could. All our stuff was made by hand.
Be able to have a picture of that now.
Yeah, I don't know who would have it.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Yeah, I know who would have had it, but I don't know if she still does. And that's Mary de Pont. I'll have to.
Like she
Cool.
actually.
Her brother used to do the most magnificent ones of those.
And so
But-
her family was there for a long time, where when cameras were more accessible to people.
No, they moved to Bermuda.
Oh, okay.
They also, that was our big, wonderful happening. A year after we were living there, then Mary and her family came, because she was my friend in the
That's
Azores.
the one you decorated the church.
Yes, yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
So
but
note
Christmas
Santa.
Christmas wasn't like what.
No, you didn't know anything about Santa.
There's no like worrying about when am I gonna get someone.
No, there were no gifts. No, what we got under the tree was we had wooden shoes, like clogs, and we put them under the tree, and it was baby Jesus who left us a walnut, and if we were lucky, we'd get a candy. But the candies were almonds, candy-coated almonds. That was the big Christmas candy. And we got walnut. And then we got to eat a tangerine off the tree. That was big Christmas do.
Wow.
And no such thing as Santa. The whole thing was, as a child, you waited till you could go to midnight mass. And midnight mass was magical. It was pitch black in as you know, in that time of year. And people would leave lamps and things as much as they could in their windows to give a little bit of light on the street. And then when it came time to walk down the street, a few would have a lamp that they carried with them, and everybody who could went to the church for the midnight mass. And I remember just wanting so bad to go to midnight mass, and Mama said, if you can stay awake till midnight or till the time to leave, you can go. Never made it.
At least we know where Tommy gets.
Yeah. And then we walked people walked down, and then when they came home, everybody went into everybody's houses that hour of the morning to have a little drink of baby Jesus pee.
Baby Jesus pee.
Baby Jesus pee was the real sweet liqueur that they made from the fennel, the one that's got the fennel, sugared fennel in the center. Ishkanshad, we called it.
Okay.
Anyway, it's very sweet and sugary and flavored with that fennel flavor. And you get a little tiny bit of it, and that's when you toast Jesus with a little bit, they called it.
You didn't want to live closest to the church then, because
No, because you wouldn't get to go to anybody's house.
it's like Christmas trick or treating.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Awesome. Well, thank you again.
We're
That
done
was
again?
fun. Yeah, I think so. We don't have any teasers except that it's almost time to travel to Bermuda.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we'll get there
Yeah.
next time. So
Yeah.
thanks again for everyone listening. And thank you, Mom.
Thank you. I love telling them. A também não se desquiser.
Yes, yes.